In the last module, we talked about respirator selection. We did some respirator selection problems using the NIOSH guide. And the NIOSH guide is real handy because for certain substances, it will tell you exactly what respirator you need. We also talked about using the PEL or the TLV or the REL along with the APF, the assigned protection factor of the respirators, using those two pieces of information combined to identify the type of respirator we need. Also, in some cases, you're not going to find it in the NIOSH guide. It's not spelled out for you so easily. You've got to do some detective work, looking at a lot of different resources from NIOSH, from OSHA, from American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists, other resources as well. And don't forget, you can always call somebody. If you don't feel comfortable making the decision yourself, talk to an expert or another expert or multiple experts to get their opinion on the situation. All right, well, what I'd like to talk about in this module, and we'll probably talk about some other issues as well, but I want to talk about choosing the correct cartridges and filters. There are a lot of different cartridge types. Now, the filtration types, there aren't as many of those, but there's a lot of different cartridge types. That's what I want to focus on first in this module. Many of the contaminants that we encounter in the workplace are classified as organic vapors, and we need an organic vapor cartridge to protect from those types of hazards, those types of contaminants. But before we go on, I think I've talked about this before. I know you've heard about it in other classes, but I want to just review what we mean by an organic vapor. An organic vapor is a vapor given off by a carbon-based compounds. One very broad class of organic vapors would be the wide variety of petroleum-based products. Gasoline, diesel, plastics that are burning. There are turpentine, acetone, a lot of different products that we use in a variety of industrial settings give off vapors that would be classified as organic vapors. Again, here's just a very brief partial list of substances that give off organic vapors. Gasoline, paint thinner, perfumes, plastics, nail polish remover, acetone, turpentine, vinyl acetate, benzene, nicotine, alcohols, camphor, asphalt fumes, MEK, Stoddard solvent, ethylene glycol, hydrogen peroxide, nitrous oxide, freon, naphtha, petroleum distillates, and styrene. And you've got to remember all of those for the exam. Just kidding about remembering all those for the exam. You don't have to really remember any of this. Understand the concepts, understand what an organic vapor is, understand that there's a wide variety of organic vapors, and many of the substances that we need to protect ourselves against in the workplace are organic vapors. Most of the cartridges utilize activated charcoal. That's the most widely used filter media for dealing with organic vapors. And we'll talk more about that. Actually, once we know what kind of contaminant we're dealing with, whether it's an organic vapor, an acid gas or particulate or something else, then it's pretty easy to check the correct or to select the correct cartridge. The acid gases, that's another very broad classification of contaminants. There are cartridges designed to protect people from acid gases, protect workers from acid gases. An acid gas is a gas that forms an acidic solution when dissolved in water. Some common examples: hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, the common element that's what we exhale during normal respiration. We exhale carbon dioxide. That's considered an acid gas and can be hazardous at very high levels. Oxides of sulfur, oxides of nitrogen, chlorine gas is a very dangerous gas at high concentrations, or even at moderate concentrations. Chlorine gas, I mean, that's one of the substances that's and throughout our history, world history, chlorine gas has been weaponized, used as a weapon during wars. There are combination cartridges that are available that provide protection from acid gases and organic vapors, and that might be a way to go in some work areas. Again, it all goes back to that initial evaluation of the workspace and the contaminants in those workspaces. What we have here on this slide is the NIOSH OSHA color coding system for cartridges and particulate filters. If we know we are dealing with acid gases, we need to contact our supplier and order acid gas cartridges. Acid gas cartridges will have a white decal, not a white stripe, but the entire outside of that cartridge will be white. Hydrocyanic acid, a specific type of acid that you may encounter in some workplaces, white with a 1/2-inch green stripe. Chlorine gas, yellow with a white with a yellow stripe. Organic vapors, black. Ammonia gas, another fairly common contaminant that's used in as a refrigerant in a lot of different manufacturing settings. Ammonia gas is dangerous. The color code for ammonia gas cartridges would be a solid green. Acid gases and ammonia gas. You can get a combination cartridge if you're working in an environment where there's the presence of acid gases and ammonia gas. This cartridge would be what you would need. Green with a 1/2-inch white stripe completely around the canister near the bottom. And when they use the term canister, they're talking about the cartridges. And if you're not clear what we're talking about with cartridges, I'll show you some pictures. I mean, you should be from our original discussion of the different types of respirators. But if not, we'll take a look at some examples of what we're talking about. Carbon monoxide. There is a cartridge for carbon monoxide, and it's blue. Acid gases and organic vapors. Combination cartridge. Yellow is the color code for that type of cartridge. Hydrocyanic acid and chloropicrin vapor. Again, I honestly don't know anything about chloropicrin. If I was in a work environment that I was unfamiliar with, I would have to do some research, evaluate that setting, see what kind of contaminants are in that work setting. It could be that chloropicrin vapor would be something that I would need to acquire to protect workers. But again, I've not any experience with that particular substance. If we have time here, it might be fun just to do a quick search. Well, heck, let's go ahead and do that right now. Let me open up a browser. First of all, whoops, that's not going to work. Let me open up a browser. Oh, there it is. And chloropicrin. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. CHL chloropic. There it is. See what this is. Chloropicrin from the CDC. A lung damaging agent. So it's not. Okay, now here are some common names for chloropicrin. Okay. Now, trichlor, I've heard of trichlor. I've heard of trichloronitromethane. It seems like I've run across that. Again, I've never been in a work environment where this was a problem. But again, if what I'm doing here is what you would do if you run into a situation where you don't know about a particular contaminant. Description. Chloropicrin PS is used in agriculture as a soil fumigant. It has also been used as a chemical warfare agent and a riot control agent. It was used in large quantities during World War I and was stockpiled during World War II. However, it is no longer authorized for military use. Chloropicrin is an irritant with characteristics of a tear gas. Chloropicrin has an intensely irritating odor. Inhalation of 1 part per million, causes eye irritation and can warn of exposure. Methods of dissemination. And what I want to see is a workplace exposure. Agriculture seems to be the primary workplace exposure. If chloropicrin is released as a liquid spray, it has the potential to contaminate agricultural products. Let's see. Here we go, personal protective equipment. First responders should use a NIOSH certified CBRN cartridge. We haven't talked about that yet, but it is a general purpose cartridge, military grade type of cartridge, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear self-contained breathing apparatus with level A protective suit. So this is some pretty serious stuff if we were getting into this. But again, this is an example of a resource that can be very useful when we encounter substances in the workplace that we're not familiar with. And that will happen. And there's nothing wrong when that happens. That's just part of being a safety manager. You're not going to know everything in every work setting. But moving on, acid gases. Here we go. Acid gases, organic vapors, and ammonia gases. A combination cartridge that provides protection against all 3 of those contaminants. The color code for that is brown. Radioactive materials except tritium and the noble gases, purple. Pesticides. Generally for pesticides, there's going to be a combination cartridge that provides particulate protection along with organic vapor protection. An organic vapor canister plus a particulate filter. Just since we're on the this path here of looking things up, let's look at pesticide protection. Pesticide respirator protection. See what comes up. 3M respiratory protection for pesticide workers. Okay, here we go. And there's a 3M cartridge that we're talking about. It protects against organic vapor, acid gas, and is a P100 particulate respirator. Again, P100 is HEPA level, 99.97% of particles, 0.3 micron and larger. So that would be a very useful type of cartridge for a lot of different work environments, because it is a triple threat, or triple protects from the 3 different types of inhaled contaminants. All right, that's if we were going pesticides, I would choose that cartridge. If I had workers, landscape workers, agricultural workers, exterminators dealing with different types of pesticides or herbicides, that would be the cartridge to use. And speaking of pesticides and herbicides, that is one of my big concerns. I almost said pet peeve. It makes me mad more than anything when I see the lawn care workers are out spraying pesticides and herbicides and they have no protection at all. Which you could probably get by with doing that for a couple of years without any long-lasting effects. But people who make that their career, they need to think about protecting themselves. And what really irritates me are the employers that allow them to go out and spray these chemicals without protection. That's just not right. That's an ethical issue there. Now, if they're self-employed, then it's on them. But if they're doing what an employer told them to do, then that's a problem that needs to be corrected. And here's the CBRN cartridge that I was talking about, the multi-contaminant cartridge, which we'll talk more about that. I've got some discussion of that on a subsequent slide. But the color for the CBRN cartridges are olive. Then P100 particulate filters are purple. P95, P99, R95, R99, and R100 are orange. Then all of the ones that are not resistant to oil are teal. Remember, N means no oil contact. R means they're oil resistant. P means they're oil proof. And I always go with the P's. Usually they're not that much more expensive to get the oil proof feature in your particulate cartridges or particulate filters. So again, a little bit of research, a chart like this, that's going to help you 99% of the time choose the cartridge that you need. Because it covers just about any type of inhaled contaminant that you're likely to encounter in the workplace. Now there are some, I don't see mercury on here, and that mercury vapors, you might need a specialty cartridge for that. Now that CBRN cartridge, that may very well provide protection against mercury as well. One more quick web search, just for fun. Let me mercury vapor protection. Here you go. 3M has a cartridge. 3M is a good supplier of cartridges, a good resource. Protects against mercury vapor, chlorine, sulfur dioxide gases. NIOSH approved for protection against mercury vapor, chlorine, or sulfur dioxide, and certain particulates. So that if you were in a work environment where there was the presence of vaporized mercury, this would be the cartridge you would want. Again, that's also a combination cartridge. Now, one thing about it, I mentioned this previously, if you're using 3M cartridges, that means you probably need to use a 3M respirator. Half mask respirator from 3M should take this cartridge. Now, if you're using MSA, that's another common respirator manufacturer, and it's good quality, just as good as 3M. If it's an MSA respirator, then you would need to use MSA cartridges. And the respirator cartridges that I had you purchase for this class, and it kills me that we're not going to be able to use those for the way I was intending to use those. I think a lot of you weren't able to get the respirators anyway, because there was such a run on respirators during the early stages of the coronavirus. But MSA was the brand that I had you guys purchase, and I forget which cartridge. It was one of the combination cartridges, and I believe it had particulate protection as well as protection from organic vapors. More information here on the particular cartridge and what it protects you from. All right, let's talk about another issue that we need to keep in mind when we're using respirators with either filters or chemical cartridges. A cartridge doesn't last forever. They need to be changed out periodically. Normally this is going to be specified by the manufacturer. It may be different for different contaminants. Now, one unwritten rule be cautious with these unwritten rules, because it may not apply to every situation. But every 40 hours of exposure or every 30 days, whichever comes first. This is a common change-out interval for the chemical cartridges, and you can apply it to particulates also. Now, there are also formulas and calculations that you can do, and there's a table that I've referred to. It's based on calculations done by a researcher with the last name Wood. Can't remember his first name right off the top of my head. Maybe it was Gilbert or Gary or Geronimo or Gilbert or something with a G. G. Wood. But anyhow, industrial hygienists who put together this table that provides standards for change-out intervals. And the table is based upon the contaminant concentration. If you're working in a concentration of toluene at where it's 1,000 parts per million, you'll want to change it out every 72 hours of exposure. And ethyl, benzene, again, concentration, and then it'll give you the hours of working life for that particular concentration. Now, unused cartridges also have an issue. They have a shelf life. They don't last forever. You can't leave them. You can't buy 10,000 cartridges for future use and then 10 years later expect them to be good. They will normally have a date code on them. This particular date code, this is a CBRN cartridge, by the way, here. This one expires December 2038. That's fairly easy to read, fairly straightforward. Again, it gives you the expiration date, year, month. So this is something to pay attention to as well. If you have if you end up working at a facility and they have a whole room full of cartridges that have been in there for a while, one of the jobs you might consider jumping on is doing an inventory of those cartridges and getting rid of any cartridges that are beyond the expiration date for those cartridges. And again, the CBRN cartridges, military grade, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear protection. Now, some cartridges will have end of service life indicators, and these are required when working with some contaminants like mercury vapor. This used along with the changeout schedule. Again, whichever comes first, 40 hours, the manufacturer spec 30 days, or the end of service life indicator says it's time. Again, whichever comes first, using any of these different criteria. And here's an example of an end of service life indicator on a cartridge. You pull the label back and there will be a bar that is indicated. If that bar is completely fills that space, then it's time to go to the trash. It's time for a new cartridge. Some other indicators that the cartridge may need to be replaced. And these aren't always foolproof. Let me go ahead and mention breakthrough first. Breakthrough occurs when the filter is full. And if it's a activated charcoal filter, it can't hold an unlimited amount of contaminant. It will get full. And when it reaches that breakthrough point, one of the early indicators is that you may smell some of the contaminant coming into your face piece. You can smell the contaminant. That's an indicator that, hey, you need another one. Breakthroughs occurred. Another concern to be aware of with chemical cartridge filters is desorption, or the release of contaminant from the filter. Again, activated charcoal filters and other types of filters, that there are two processes involved: either absorption, where it absorbs the contaminant into the media, or adsorption, where the contaminant adheres to the surface of the filter media. But desorption is when the media starts releasing the contaminant. So that's just, if you follow the changeout schedule specified by the manufacturer, you should be in good shape. Just real quick here, let's do one other web search. I've kind of gotten on a web search kick here. 3M chemical cartridge changeout schedule. See what 3M. Again, 3M's coming up, so I'm just going with 3M. Cartridge change, frequently asked questions. There's several different resources here. Let's just go with this one real quick. I don't want to, that's going to make me download a PDF file. I don't want to do that. Here's cartridge change schedules for low exposure. And here's information from 3M concerning their recommendations. But generally, you're going to be good if you follow the manufacturer's recommendations for change-out intervals. All right, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end our discussion of cartridge selection. Making sure we collect the right cartridge is very important. There's more information out there. Your textbook has some good information. And of course, the internet is a great resource. And as with everything else on the internet, though, make sure it's a credible organization. You don't want to. You probably aren't going to be in good shape if you follow Bubba's recommendations on cartridge selection. Go to a legitimate resource, CDC, NIOSH, a manufacturer like 3M or MSA. Look at the online scientific literature that would be available as well. So there's a lot of resources available through the internet. Heck, I wish the internet had been around when I was it was when I started my safety career, but there are so many more resources available now than there were, say, 20 years ago. All right, I will see you in the next module.